Let's go with first. I had suggested to the, in the agenda there, where the budget committee was kind of waiting that we could think about starting that at 6. I don't know if you want to just go right to the budget workshop and then see how long you want to go with that, and then you can revisit the regular agenda or not, or if you want.
Do we have the budget committee available though? It's not quite.
We got one.
5 minutes.
We got the only one we need.
All right.
Go through some of those other things.
Are we
first?
ready to, we have to first, are we ready?
All right.
Because we have to make.
Yep.
All right. I make a motion that we authorize the town attorney to file an appeal of Judge Bruce C. Maloney, his decision on March 2nd, 2022.
That the end of the motion?
That's my motion.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, second.
Seconded. All those in favor? All right.
Okay.
All right. We'll do this, we'll do numbers 4 and 5 and number 6 and probably 7, something in the speakers, and then we'll skip down to the budget workshop. How about that? Number 4, minutes, approve the minutes from the March 1st board and joint budget committee workshop and the March 8th budget workshop. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Number 5, approve and sign treasurer's warrant number 37.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Sorry. it was already in there.
Yeah. I tell her all the things we do wrong. and I do it.
Number 6, communications. I believe we have one from the Maine Lobstermen Association thanking us for our donation of $1,000 to the legal fund. I hope it is spent well and it works out because
Yep.
it is important.
The end of the community.
Yes, the coastal community. No other communications, correct?
You have the one from PIA.
That's kind of,
Or is that you?
that's kind of to go with the proposed ambulance change.
Oh, okay.
Fee schedule changes,
Okay.
just so you
Alright.
can see.
Is that it? Then just MLA? Okay. 7, speakers from the floor. Seeing none, we will move on to 10, a budget workshop.
Yay.
All right, what is first on the budget workshop agenda?
We have, but I didn't notice it.
Law enforcement last week,
Did I
right?
write it
The
down?
town property, we haven't done fire department, right?
Mm-mm.
Am I correct on that?
We want to
These are the ones we've done.
start with the CEO LPI.
Okay. COLPI.
Just coming down so I can see everybody.
As far as any goals that Faye had brought up, some of it's a continuation from last year. We are putting in, both agreed that wanted to put in a small amount in the budget for the dues portion to become a ICC member, to purchase some of the code books that go along with building code standards. Still the state of Maine allows towns that are under, I believe, 4,000 people in population to have the kind of the option to actively enforce those MUBEC, the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code standards. It is, from what I understand from phase training and what I've looked into, it's a requirement that any new construction be built to the standards. But the towns that are under that size don't have a obligation to actively enforce, but it is enforceable. I'm assuming that this change happened, I think, within the last year. So at some point, this has been a slow push to kind of make that happen. And I'm assuming that within the next couple of years that this will become a requirement of small towns to officially adopt and actively enforce these things. And so, Faye and I talked about trying to at least get the books in-house. So at least it's something that we have. If someone did want to reference, they are relatively pricey. So I wouldn't expect everyone to go out buying them that's building a house, but the contractors building homes probably should have them and should be building to those, or at least be aware of it. So I think this is something that we wanted to try and foreshadow and get ahead of, and at least have that as a resource in-house and start to message that to builders to assume that this is likely coming. I'm assuming the insurance companies and property owners will be the ones to push back and point out some of those issues first, if we're not actively enforcing it. But I feel like it's probably something that we're going to see happen and forced upon us to actively enforce soon. So that's kind of the, on there we've had on there to try and digitize some of our older records, instead of having just the paper version, the minutes that have been recorded, to try and digitize some of those files and have a backup to those. It's kind of a longer term look. I think we're due for having a more thorough kind of updated shoreline survey of buildings, something that was done quite some time ago, but to try and capture current uses of buildings, just to make sure that those uses haven't changed. At least document what they are as of that particular year it gets surveyed. I guess that's most of those things. So getting into some of those costs, or kind of summarizing the proposed increases or changes. There's a small increase on the wages, mostly attributing to the change in the $2.50 raise that was approved per hour. The number of hours from last year to next year being proposed, I don't believe are any different. And then travel and trans up slightly.
Supplies is up,
That's the books.
that's the books.
Yeah. I think we were shopping. If you become a member, there's a pretty good discount for the main memberships. But I want to say it's about, I think it was 750.
So that being the training.
Yeah,
dues,
$750 for the books. So
If you are a member,
if you're a member.
Okay.
Yeah.
how much is the membership?
140.
And that's in the training dues and subscriptions line. That's
Yeah,
up.
we looked it up and I think it's
Up by
145.
Okay, that's up by 45. So
And if you're not a member and you're paying for the books, I want to say it was closer to $1,000. So and to have access to the International Code Association is a resource is very
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
It's a whole other set of people kind of weighing in and offering support and feedback on things.
what is the proposed increase in the permits?
It's on the summary page. So a couple years ago, the board increased the fees for the first time in a while, with the goal to try and get generating close to 50% with that increase to the actual cost that we see. And I think, based on the activity, based on the time that gets put into it, the proposal was to increase those rates again and not fall so far behind. Now, I don't know if the board wants to still aim for 50% or if you want to try and get a little bit more. I mean, there's a lot of the work that's being generated for the code officer is directly correlated to building projects. There is some that comes with enforcement action that has to be reviewed and followed up on. So it's not to say all of it's generated, all the time's generated by the activity. So
But
it is.
a large majority is
Mhm.
dealing with permits.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, it was just a
Mostly.
suggestion to increase some of those fees. We haven't proposed a clear breakdown of what that proposal would look like, but at least throwing it out there to say with the increase in the expense, do we want to try and cover that through the fees?
What percentage of the work is it 75? Is it 80? Is it 65? I mean, we should try and cover whatever percentage of it is, or at least get close to it if we know a number.
I tried to, it's not something I asked her to really break down and track, but, went over with her on the screen, an estimate of 1,200 hours, and an estimate of how to break that down. 120 hours estimated, for training, that includes the travel time to and from whatnot, and the being in class. So being at the board, supporting the planning board, which is obviously all about the permits, floodplain compliant shoreline zone, the enforcement issues, estimating 144 hours in total for enforcement issues. Some of that may have to do with the active permits. Some of that is going to be after the fact, things based on complaints. So that and the training would probably be the only thing I'm thinking that wouldn't be permit based. So if you take those two, you're at 264 hours out of 1,200. So 20%, I guess, is or 80% is, or close to 80% is going to be permit based time.
You want to try to, should we shoot for like 75? There will be times, of course, that number for enforcement is higher. We've had some big cases obviously over the past few years that really suck up time.
Based on those numbers, 78%. So you round it up to 80, round it down.
Well, and maybe you do want to, where are we at now?
Says
It
50.
seems like there's a lot of
I'd shoot for 75, maybe.
there's been a lot of activity at statewide in new buildings, new houses, and I feel like that's happening out here too, correct? Like I feel like there's gonna be more requests for permits and for building, not fewer, so.
I hope so.
Well, it's not gonna be people who are living here.
Well, that's true. Yeah, but otherwise we'll get the money out of them.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with Jake. Probably if 75% of code enforcement officers' time is dealing with building permits, plumbing permits, whatever it is, then we should increase the rates. That would be pretty substantial, right?
Yeah, right now we budget to bring in, for this year, 16,500 based on what we've received through December 30.
It was already about
First,
that,
it was almost there.
right?
It's been a very active last couple of years,
Yeah.
as you all know.
Yeah.
I've seen.
So to have that number again, you have to add another $8,000 collected in fees, approximately.
Yeah, if you want to get to
Yeah.
75%. Now, the plumbing fees is something the state sets, so we don't have a whole lot of
Okay.
ability to influence that. And, between 35,100 and 4,000 seems to be where the last few years where that's kind of fallen. So estimating 3,500 for revenue from plumbing permits. So if you take that off you're down to 33, call it 32.5. If you want to try and cover 75% of that 36,000, you can figure what that difference is. So it'd be 23,500, the number under phase column there. So you'd want to go from 16.5 to 20,000. Or sorry, 12,005 to 20,000. So it'd be a pretty substantial, and that's where we'd have to sit and figure out what that looks like. And I think we charge 15 cents a square foot right now for structures, for houses. And if that's where, we've gone. Last time we did this, we kind of brought forward where the activity was, where was the most, the biggest opportunity to try and get there, and you put it equitably and raise every fee schedule, every fee we have on there for driveways, which is separate than structures, which is separate than piers, which is, I think if we at least go back and look and say, where's the most activity? Where's it? Kind of like when we do the transfer station. I mean, the biggest volume we have is in the trash bags instead of some of the other ones. And so that's the easiest to collect. Do we want to try and put it there? And similarly, do we put it with just the square foot value of building any structure? Or do you want to try and piece it out and figure out, this much more for driveways per foot or this much more? So at least we can come back to you if you want.
Is there,
What's that?
I was just gonna ask if there was a way on like the building permits, if you could add a surcharge to say the ones that were over 10,000 square feet, or, you know, like a bigger house where someone who has the money wouldn't really care to pay an extra, you know, surcharge on those houses, because you would think those would require more than the other ones. So I just didn't know if there was a way to have two different, you know, if it was under a certain square footage, have it at this price, if it was over a certain square footage, have it at that price.
Yeah, I think one thing we can look at doing, and we haven't really been assessing it, is, you know, the ones that are in the shoreline zone definitely take a little more effort to track and follow up on. There's just a lot more to comply with when you're working within the shoreline zone. So I think, you know, we could consider, I mean, I think the fee schedule may have a fee assessed to a shoreline zone permit, but I don't know that we've actively been collecting those. But I think it's at $25. If you think about how much time by the CEO will be spent on average for any shoreline zone permit,
$25 is not
$25 covers 1 hour, and I'd be willing to bet we're spending 3 to 4 hours on average.
Right.
Just to get off the ground.
Right.
You know, and then you've got to kind of check in on the project. Do they have the erosion control stuff in place? Have they cut more trees than they should have? And just making sure. So it does require a lot more follow-ups. I think that fee potentially is we have had a lot of activity in the shoreline zone. So that could be one way to get a little bit more and assess it where where it's taking the time. You know, and if I don't know if we've had, I don't remember a 10,000 square foot. I know you just threw a number up there, you know, and maybe we can kind of go back and look and see what the average house is, and, you know, try and look at, you know, at what point does it, and actually ask the question, does it cost us more based on square footage? I think where it's sited, I think is where it spends more time. If it's in a, you know, near or closer to a resource area, it costs a little more time to check in on those things.
But what's the likelihood of a legal challenge though to his idea?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, those are the properties that.
I mean, if we had internal building codes that we had to actively enforce, I would say absolutely, you could assume it to cost more, because you're going to be inspecting every bit of how that's built, and are the stairs to code, is the wiring to code. I mean, you spend a lot more time in a much bigger house that way, but the way we don't do that now.
But it sounds like we're gonna have to do that in the future.
I would imagine that it'll be happening at some point.
Okay.
That's just my.
well, if I was gonna build say you said it even 5,000 square feet,
That's a
well,
big
my
house.
house is gonna be 4,998 square feet. So, you know, they're gonna wheeze, it's gonna be.
I think
able-
you're just asking for an issue if you don't just do it flat out,
Yeah.
flat rate and be done with it.
I think that's
It's probably, it's
easiest way.
probably, yeah, the easiest way too.
I mean, we have the separate fee for if you're building in the floodplain, that requires another level of permitting. I mean, by this floodplain ordinance, and again, the shoreline zoning, I think you're okay with having those kind of fees if you're doing that activity in those two different zones. And collecting those fees for those, because that we can easily correlate more time, you
To
know,
those
to those
properties.
particular pieces.
Okay.
You know, and to go from 15 cents, if, you know, say, I don't know if 20 cents a square foot would cover it, and again, we have to get in there, but if we know that the board and the budget committee's kind of goal is to say, yeah, let's cover 75% of this cost for this department by way of revenue, then at least Faye and I can kind of go back, look at and figure out, is it 20 cents a square foot? Is it 25 cents a square foot?
What do other
and present
towns,
that back.
have you ever looked at other, and what's the norm?
For whom, which type of town? And it's all kind of all over the place. You know, when we did this last time, you know, we felt 15 cents was kind of at that lower end of what most were doing. There were certainly some that were still lower than what we were even at prior to the raise. But I think 20 to 25 cents is a pretty standard for a small community to put that in there. I mean, still a part-time position, and just looking at, you know, trying to raise a fair amount based on that time spent on those permits. We'd have to wait and just kind of see what that looks like, you know, but we can go back and use that same worksheet we did last time.
Why not just say 20 cents, because you don't know how many permits you're gonna have. So you can't control that, so just
Right.
go 20 cents and be done with it.
But we did last time look at the permits issued, the different types of permits issued, the square foot for, you know, structures built.
Yeah.
And so we can go back and look at
Look
that,
at
just so
history.
that we know that 20 cents would be enough, or if it's too much, then we don't. So we can at least, if we know
You got a
that
history to look at.
75%
You
is
got to-
kind of the target, we can come back to you.
Yeah,
with.
if that's not a difficult lift for you guys to do, we
Mm.
might as well do it.
Nope.
It's another analysis we can use.
Beauty of keeping spreadsheets.
Yes. All right, any other questions, comments on this particular item? All right, seeing none, what's the next item up?
I have harbor.
Harbor?
Harbor or harbor master.
Towards the front, mine's blue. I think Leslie's.
Yep, I got a little blue, mine's blue.
And just for the record, anyone's budget, if you will, that we're talking about, if they're not here, it's only because I know I didn't communicate that to Jim in this case. Not because he's not interested in advocating for his budget. but,
Oh, he
um,
didn't know about it, you're saying.
Right, but we do talk about needs and did talk, I mean, we've heard from him before about the increase on this one. Actually, this one we had a decrease. We had an increase in the town property for a float. This one here, we had, and still intend to try and get floats built with this year's budget. But if we were able to do that, then it wouldn't be carried into next year's budget for this harbor master line where we had it. An increase being proposed for the salaries. And this is based on conversations with the actual effort and work going into it. Sometimes we get those reports and most of what his conversation is about is more verbal reports. So I don't have a good record to show you about actual hours spent sometimes, but something we've been pushing for him to provide.
Yeah, I mean, we need to have that. It's important for all the departments to provide data for all of us to use.
Yeah, that's right.
You want my father to start coming to select meetings?
No, I want to file reports and we can read those reports.
It has been a challenge just to get those on a regular basis.
So this one was down because we have the flow cost in a different line, is that right?
Yeah, so historically, my understanding is this particular line, or this department, if you will, for harbor master, typically includes the cost to deal with the town parking lot by the old fire hall. And that the town wharf is under town properties, and so any costs associated with the town wharf float and
Okay.
repairs of the hoist and that had fallen into there. I don't know if you want that going forward or not, but that's my understanding of how it had been set up, and so we kind of continued that. I think a few years ago, we had the cameras, under FY20, those cameras were purchased for the old fire hall to look out over that wharf that particular year, and the other budget line carried the camera costs to put them overlooking the old fish plant.
So is the big decrease in supplies line, is that,
So that was,
did we have it in there last year for a float? What did we have, why was it 14,000 last year?
we had,
I mean, I'm glad it's going down, but
Yeah.
it's a decrease. So.
yeah, we put in, I mean, essentially for one float, we wanted to put one more, we'd be able to replace a float, or add another float, I believe it was. We're hopeful that we might be able to buy the supplies for maybe even 2 floats.
I have them built.
And if we can get them built, either in-house or with, volunteers or with the school potentially, but that would be a way to get a second float. But if we had to buy a float built, we were, before price changes, we were looking at 10,000, 12,500.
Okay.
So that was budgeted last year. I mean, as a line item, thinking that we'd only get 1 float, but between Jim and I, we're hoping that we could get 2.
So obviously in supplies, we didn't spend much. Does the unspent money, does that go into reserve?
The unspent from this goes to, as with most of them, just goes to the undesignated fund balance,
Okay.
unless otherwise directed by the warrant article.
Maybe we ought to create a float reserve.
Right.
Well, we have your harbor reserve.
Yeah.
And that gets funded.
Is
That's
that-
true.
You can use that for
Mhm.
floats.
My big, I guess I shouldn't have skipped over this. Remove or stabilize old ferry pen crib work, an estimated cost of $1 million. I'm not saying it's not something that we shouldn't address, but is that our best estimate right now?
It was 750, 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay,
And that was, I don't know if you remember that study that was done. We were one of 10, I think it ended up being 9, but 10 towns originally with working waterfront access and improvements. And so we were part of that study. And we used the old state, ferry pen in our dock, our slips there
yeah,
as the site. And it actually included some of the ferry infrastructure, where we were raising concerns for and where that plays a pivotal role in removing or shipping the lobster freight. We made a case that was working waterfront. Because without that bridge there, in the boat, you wouldn't have them going anywhere the way they do it. So they did look at other pieces of the ferry infrastructure, given that there's been cancellations just due to high tide, that was something that we said, well, can we look at that? And so just looking at dealing with that pen, they had the engineers looking at that and what they saw at low tide, they were suggesting a complete removal, and that 750 is what they were estimating for complete removal of what was there. So there's certainly a lot more to understand about, does it have to, other alternatives, can you build a structure around those ones? So if they were, they wouldn't fall, or if they did, it was contained. What type of structure might go back in its place if there's one that's required? There was a lot more to understand, but again, that was just a number that they had in that report, was 750. And so I
feel like there could be some dollars, some grant money out there that could help if it's
Mm.
working waterfront, right? That we
Should
could
be.
look into,
Right.
but that's
Still
something
gonna
we
be a
should,
big fight.
yeah, that's something we should look into if we could get half of it matched or
I was
20% or whatever.
putting that
but-
there on kind of that longer term outlook.
Yeah.
They didn't say, you got to do it next year, but it's probably something that you shouldn't lose sight of. The state ferry system isn't gonna
They're not,
contribute anything to
they're not
that.
gonna do anything.
The community asked for it to stay up. They were gonna take it down at that point, and that community asked for it to stay up as a wave attenuator, a wave break for the harbor.
Yeah.
And so you have to work in cooperation with them so it doesn't impact their service and the ferry pen, but
Okay.
I did say we waived the cost of, if they were willing to bring the barge out and take it down, we would waive the cost to dispose of the material, but I didn't go to that.
All right, any other questions on this particular item?
And this one's generally for the large part offset by the revenue from the boat registrations.
Yep.
I
Which
don't-
we have no say in, right? That's all set by the state. Yeah. Okay. All right. What is the next item?
Animal control.
All right. Back.
Orange.
Oh, there it is. No change.
Only increase here.
Oops, I got the wrong
The
tab. Sorry.
10% that it is $525, almost 10% of last year's budget, but mostly in the salaries. That's another one that Jim has expressed the amount of time spent dealing with dog issues, animal issues, primarily dog issues. And still needing, it'd be ideal to have those reports and time spent written down and tracked.
Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna have to assess some of it. How do you do that?
Get someone else who's willing to take the job, I guess.
Yeah, I could be a little more insistent that we have those, but if we don't get them, then we'll treat it similar to personnel issues, so. we keep working on that.
Are most of the dog issues, people don't have them registered or on
That takes up a-
leashes or?
The registration takes a fair amount of time, so typically what'll happen is, once they come due, and usually some point, had been doing it in the fall, and we're gonna try and do it in the spring this year, because by the time the fall rolls around, if you're just starting to make those calls, hey, you didn't register your dog, we'd like your dog's registered, you actually get pretty close to the next
Next
renewal
year.
year, because I think that starts in like end of October, I
Yep.
believe. And then when it comes February 1st, they're late. So you can renew them a few months in advance of the new year. The registrations go by calendar year. So we're gonna try and see if he can do that in the late spring or early summer. He tries to work around his fishing schedule, but with, I think, 400 dogs, I think is roughly
Oh,
what we
God.
have
That's a
in
lot.
town. So that initial call list is pretty substantial. Anyone that's here for, I believe, more than 6 days, is supposed to register the
Right.
dog here. There isn't a system in the state that, would communicate that he'd say, oh, okay, I can see your tag. You live in another town in Maine, and we can just pull it up and see that, yep, you do have the rabies certificate. And that's really the big issue there.
There isn't a system.
There is
that does-
not
okay,
currently that would
alright.
talk between towns, and so the
That's-
expectation
that's
is definitely if you're from out of state, we want to have it because there would be no, real way to, at least the
Check it.
state has a record of it if you're living in the state. There hasn't been clear, so in any case, a lot of time is spent doing that. Some of his time, I wish I had it broken down and was tracked in a way that I could share with you. The enforcement side, aside from the registration, usually just comes from complaints or issues of dogs at large. He's had to spend, I don't know if he's had to go to court, but he has written a few summonses each year to deal with nuisance dogs or potentially dangerous dogs. It's not common, but it does happen.
What is the registration fee? Is it
$6
$6.
if your dog is spayed or neutered and you do it before the deadline. If it's not spayed or neutered, it's another few bucks.
Yeah, it's not
It's like
much.
$10 or $12. And if it's late, it's a $25 late fee. So it'd be 31 if your dog was spayed or neutered if you waited until February. So it's not a lot.
So by this number here, what we collected, I guess that was only as of December.
Right.
We're definitely not getting high compliance on the registration.
Yeah, you can see in 2020, it was just over $2,000, almost $2,200. But if you had 400 dogs and they were all registered on time, it's $6 a piece.
Oh, actually, that is
It
pretty
should be
good.
2,400.
Yeah,
that
pretty
is-
good. You got
2
pretty
years
good.
ago is pretty good, but so far, and then in 21, it went way down.
Oh, yeah, because fiscal year 2021 was the year that
People didn't go out because of COVID.
Oh, yeah, and you didn't have to, and
there was all sorts of, yeah.
you didn't have to do a lot of the registration things, right?
You couldn't, I think the way they did it is they were still required to be registered, but they were not accepting them in the courts. If they didn't, like, they wouldn't hear a non-registration case.
Gotcha.
All
All right.
There's no point in even hitting with a summons.
Are there any questions about this particular item? All right, what's the next one?
Cemeteries.
Well, there's be mindful of the managers and the departments columns.
Oh, yeah.
This is for discussion's sake. This is meant to prompt discussion. Eric's here. He happens to also be on the cemetery committee. I know that they've talked about some of this stuff in general before, but we contract out the mowing service. I've kind of brought it up very generally before, if not in these meetings, certainly to myself. On paper, the cost of the contract, I just put up there, is there a period or an amount in which that contract becomes at a certain cost? Do we consider bringing the operation in-house? Last year's conversation with the person who had the contract, the understanding was that they would desire to raise. We didn't end up putting it back out to bid, so we didn't end up doing the amount that they were seeking. And so having an idea of what that number was last year gave me a sense of, okay, I have an idea of where it might go. Now, if we go to put that out to bid again, based on the amount, they were thinking, we'd have to put it out to bid unless you wanted to waive your bid policy. And we'd see what the number was. It could come in lower, it could come in higher. But right now, between the cemeteries and the parks, I think it's about 37 or 38,000 in total. The cemetery budget has a certain portion of that assessed to it. About 34,000 for the cemeteries roughly. So the the question is, is there a point, do you want to continue? I think I'll let Eric speak to the cemetery committee in terms of, what they see and, how they feel about it. I don't know that I have truly a strong recommendation one way or the other. I mean, if we take it in-house, we've got to buy equipment. We don't have mowers. Yeah, weed whackers. We don't have mowers. If we bring it in-house, we got to be prepared to have the staffing to be able to do the job. It's not an easy job. I know the cemetery next door, because we'll hear it, we see it, takes at least 2 days, sometimes with even 2 people. And you've got almost a dozen cemeteries that we're trying to mow and maintain. During the summer months, it would take at least one person, the better part of a work week, to do the cemetery mowing. If you have another person helping them, that's at least part-time, helping them with that. So we'd have to, that and feel comfortable being able to bring that in-house if we did that. Not saying it'd be cheaper, bringing it in-house would be, the idea I would put up there would be that it would become a full-time position, in that they'd spend, instead of 6 months a year mowing, they'd spend 12 months a year working for the town, being able to do more than just mowing for the cost of benefits. When that contract price gets to a certain point, we can hire someone and pay benefits and get 6 months, roughly 4 to 6 months worth of additional work. At what increased costs, right? The cost of benefits, at the cost of the equipment, and the responsibility solely of getting the job done.
The years you make of the best are your very dry summers when mowing isn't as often, of course. You have a nightmare, of course, when you have a wet summer. And it's, the grass grows a foot, grass grows a foot every day.
Last summer was very wet.
Yeah.
I like this idea, but I also would, you could get yourself in a real mess. You put it out to, you put the position out there and you don't have someone apply for a couple months.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you told your guy, you told your contractor, we don't need your services anymore. And he's gonna say, well, I guess you don't need my services anymore. And then you really got a mess. But yeah, in general, I like the idea. But with all the other capital projects we have, is if it might require an extra person, not just one person, you taking away from those capital projects on roads. So maybe now isn't the time.
You say capital, you mean routine, some of the
Well,
routine stuff that have
well,
turned into capital projects?
Yes,
Ditching.
right now, turned into a capital project.
Okay, we set a standard that we want to see about, cutting the grass when it's 6 inches. And if it doesn't get cut during the time period, then it needs to be raked up. It's been haphazard about the trash being picked up. So we've added some things and some standards. So the committee said, if it's David, okay, if it's someone else, it's a town employee, that's up to you guys, Andy, to decide which way you want to do it. So that it will also help, this is kind of loosey-goosey before, things were in the contract, but no one ever enforced them in the past. So we figured by saying we want the standard, then Andy can say to David or whoever, although I have had conversations with David in explaining this to him. Potentially he wants a pretty good increase this year, pretty substantial. So then it gets closer to what Andy's saying about it being a separate person being hired by the town to do it, if you go that route. So if that's a separate person, it shouldn't really affect the other projects, because that person will be on their own doing the cemetery. It'll be separate from the crew that you already have now doing the bigger stuff.
If you can hire someone.
Right.
That's the problem we run into. I agree with Eric,
And
both Erics.
if that other person doesn't need help sometimes.
Right.
Well, this is the problem we have too, like you guys with no reports from Jimmy. We don't have anything from David, so I can tell you, it takes him X amount of hours to do this one, this one, this one. So we're going, kind of long.
We have it just by week, what properties or cemeteries get mowed in what week, just but not an hour. So we have something, but just not hours wise. We don't know.
And then
Yeah,
just.
what- This is Bill, and what about if this person is working by themselves, how do they get the mower to the next job?
But part of the, if it's in-house, Bill,
Yeah,
right? So if it's something that comes in-house, then we got to have a conversation and acknowledge that, there have to be an upfront cost to the town to buy
Equipment.
equipment.
Yep.
What- does that mean you buy him a pickup truck too to haul the mower on a little trailer?
Maybe, but not necessarily. At a minimum, right, you're gonna need a riding mower. I would recommend, in hope it doesn't go down during the mowing season if you only have the one, but, starting out with just one rider and potentially 2 push mowers. And in a small equipment trailer, which we used to have until it disappeared from the Coots Corner lot a few years ago.
Well, I remember my old granddaddy used to say, overhead walks in the door on 2 feet. So I don't think we should be doing that. I think we should be continuing to let this out to other people.
What is the so significant raise, what's in here right now?
I just put a contingency. I'm not gonna, I do not recall, nor will I remember what the person thought it was last year. I mean, it's not fair to them. It's a conversation I had and I won't remember what it was.
But right,
I
you
put a
have 34
contingency in here
and
for-
so 40,000. That's what we think.
That's for cemeteries portion. That's just my guess as to what, I think we should be prepared for a bid price. I mean, we saw a lot happen this past 2 years with wage expectations and the cost of supplies and fuel
Yeah.
stuff now. I'd hate to know what that bid price would be when we put that out. And then of course, there's the portion not in here with the cemeteries, but with the town properties for mowing parks. So, this contract right now, most parks too.
I'd like to see 2 things, I guess, for this discussion, and not right now, in 5 minutes. I'd like, first, the easy part will be that contract we have currently right now. And secondly, some sort of idea from you about not only just how much time will take to take care of cemeteries and also parks and other town properties, but also what else we can expect to accomplish in a year by having another person on the crew.
Right.
I'd like to see how much more money we're gonna have to spend to have this person have their health insurance and their retirement and all that stuff too, because if we hire them on as part of the public works, they're gonna get all that stuff. So I think it's gonna be a little bit more money than if we keep it out of house, we just have to pay their wages. We don't have to pay any of the other stuff. So, I mean, if his lawnmower breaks down, it's on him.
Right, I was just gonna say, the maintenance of lawnmowers, the push mowers, whatever it is, all on them.
And it's
The fuel
not,
costs, all that, right? We're just
Well,
paying,
and
we have a
that-
contract that we pay and
and
that's
it's
it.
not year round.
Well,
It's
would
not
be-
year round.
No, I mean, the hiring out.
This contract
It's-
covers the
it's just
mowing
And the
mowing.
season.
contract's
It's
good for a
just-
calendar year, but the mowing
But-
season
Yes.
Right.
is. Now, whether there's more things in the contract that would have expectations, now maybe it's advantageous not to be doing tree and brush removal when it's the hottest months of the year, and maybe, I don't know if the contract, I think we were talking about making sure that it was clear that defining the property boundaries of the cemetery would be a good thing, so lots aren't lost and the boundaries aren't lost, and that's something that has happened in the last few years. We kind of lost sight of some of our boundaries. These need to be reestablished, and some graves are buried in I know in this one, and others too. And so I think, with that contract, some of the points Eric was making, some of the other conditions and standards being set in there that I wouldn't, someone's gonna look at that. And I think the difference when you're looking at equipment, and having to replace things, and the responsibility, it would be solely on us to get those things fixed, right? And the big difference I see is we're doing it at cost. Anyone that's got a business is gonna have to account for the lost time and have to bid a price out. And if it's a dry year, then good for them. If it's a real wet year, well, they're gonna work a lot harder for, the money they got. So we've done this before with plowing on Main Street. It's always a crapshoot when you do these kinds of things. You could pay by the hour, you could do a fixed price. we'd have to ask, or specify in the bid a fixed price or an hourly rate.
Well, when do we have to put this out to bid fairly soon, right?
If you're going to put it out to bid, I would recommend doing it fairly soon. The
Right.
contract currently goes to the end of June.
Because what are the chances of us being able to hire another full-time employee to do this particular job before the mowing season? I feel like we're gonna have to go this next budget season with the contract anyway, and we could revisit next
Revisit
year
it,
and
yeah.
see, because we put out the bid, we find out it's, oh, they're gonna charge us $60,000. Well, yeah, we're probably gonna have to hire someone in-house. But if we can get away with 40, we're probably still coming out ahead. So,
Does it get advertised every year?
No. The
So
board
make-
decides whether.
we
to
should
or not.
advertise it this year.
It should, I mean, like a lot of, like coaching jobs, for example, even though you're probably gonna get the same one, but they have to be advertised every year.
Right.
So why shouldn't we do that with this?
No, we
type of
should. I
thing?
mean, plus
Yeah.
it's 15,000 is our minimum, right? If it's 15,000 or more, we have to put out the bid anyway, so.
Yeah,
So why don't we do it by bid? If we don't have the right bid, then make the decision to hire.
Because it takes a long
Well,
time
we-
to fill a position.
Well, yeah,
So
if
finding.
we can't get the right bid, then we'll have to try to hire someone, but sorry, Eric, go ahead.
Well, the only thing you might find someone more interested in this job because this is gonna be their job operating a lawnmower and a push mower. You're not asking someone that's got a commercial license or is even gonna have to go get a commercial truck driving license. So this might catch someone's eye that a regular road crew position, might not. I'm not saying it will, but this is not the same expectations of the employee, too. So,
We can talk about that, and
not to hold things up.
But the other thing too is if they're gonna be a full-time employee, we're gonna want them to do things other than mowing.
Off season, right.
And if it's the winter time, and that's a benefit, I guess I'm thinking about is, looking at beyond the mowing season for the cost. Again, at some point, the contract may get to a point where it's the cost of benefits, or potentially at some year, it might be the same cost as having an employee with benefits, potentially. At almost 40 grand.
It's getting close.
That's more than we pay our public works workers starting out for salary. And so in my mind, you're talking $18,000 to $20,000, the cost of benefits to have 6 more months worth of work. With the, again, full responsibility of getting the job done, and not having a contract to say, hey, how come that didn't happen? Or
Right, how can we enforce the parts that haven't been getting done?
you can withhold pay,
Yeah,
you can terminate the contract,
The contract got terminated with the.
in which case you're
previous
still left with
contractor
having to find the solution on your own anyways.
back in 2013.
what was that at?
Back in 2013 or 2014, the town terminated the contract abruptly.
Yeah, we've done it twice. We've terminated contracts for people that didn't do it. And I've had conversations with the current guy, so going in, we know he wants more money, but he also knows that we, expect more too, which then helps justify him wanting more money.
Yep.
So,
no, I agree.
so it's not like we're changing thing and he's not aware of it, and it isn't like he hasn't said, oh no, I wouldn't cut trees or bushes, so.
Well, if we put out the bid, is that gonna ruffle feathers or?
I told him, I told the contractor that we have last year that, we have to put it out to bid, and it might be in the contractor's best interest if, because of the expected increase. I said it has to go. It's a fair process,
Right.
but it gives them the opportunity to, because I told them about our policy, and so we're stuck within a limit, and it has to go to bid at a certain point unless you waive it. For something like that, I think it's really important that the public have the opportunity to have, if someone else wanted the chance to bid on it, that they have it.
Yep.
But it's a fair chance for that contractor to say, hey, I really need to increase these costs of the contract. If I'm not making enough money to run my business and
No,
make a profit, then I have to increase it. So that's a fair way to be able to offer that opportunity.
Yeah.
I guess 2 more things that had kind of come up. One was, if, so to your point, if you wait another year, you're gonna be in the same situation in terms of the budget process and when do you hire. And so there was one suggestion, would we be open to, would a contractor be open to saying, let's do it for this mowing season? you know, if you wanted to kind of commit to a half year of, you know, we'll do this, you know, we'll look for someone potentially during the winter month to come on board if you wanted to go that route. And then you'll know potentially by the spring that, hey, we don't have someone that's joined us, you know, we need to put another contract out.
Mhm.
You know, how we budget for what that cost would be, I don't know, what that would look like, but that's another way to kind of to test it and say, you know, could we bring someone else in-house and give us some time to do that? And then the other one, and I am not proposing or recommending this, it's kind of like the conversation about roads. You could always, if you want to lower your road paving costs, you could always consider turning them back to gravel. I'm not suggesting that either, but with this conversation, I mean, do you want to look at, you know, what is the expectation of the cemeteries, you know, throughout the season, you know, beyond the holidays, you know, and is that, you know, I think I've seen it as low as 4 inches in previous contracts that it be kept at, you know, and, you know, is that the standard? If you want to keep it at 4 to 6 inches, then you're gonna spend a lot more time doing it. You know, do you want to reconsider at all what the conditions of those look like? Not proposing that, I'm just saying that's the only other way to cut cost.
So it's the same criteria applied to the parks as well as what the cemeteries,
That I don't
4 to
believe.
6 inches or whatever.
I think, well, it's not in there currently, but
Well-
presumably that would be something the Parks Commission might want to weigh in on
Yes,
before we finalize and
absolutely.
put it out to bid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Mhm.
how much time is involved? What's the workload that they're doing? Are they working 4 weeks every week? Is it a 40-hour week? Or what are they doing?
We don't know.
I think that's another thing. We have to ask for an accounting of their time.
Yes.
We have
Put that in
to
the
have that,
contract.
put that in the contract.
Yeah, it's like, add that to the contract.
Yeah.
Yes.
And not, I worked this, you know, it's gotta be
We'd like to know,
daily.
we know the hours that we can better plan, yes.
Yeah, all you have to do is just keep a journal daily and turn it in once a week.
As a business, I assume the business would be keeping a log like that, so they know where they spend their time.
Well, that would be nice to think, but apparently that's.
A well-run business would be
Well
doing
run,
that, yes.
Well, I mean, it's like, you know, lobstermen would keep track of what they catch every time they go out, what their expenses are every time they go out. I mean, right, if you're running a business, I would assume, he might very well have that record, but It's not in the-
I don't keep track of anything.
if it's not in the contract, then it must be provided, so we can certainly put that in.
Yeah.
Well,
But
yeah,
I think if we are gonna consider it being full-time at some point, yes, we should probably start looking sooner rather than later. So maybe we start advertising something near the end of the summer about
mhm.
a full-time position to see if there is anyone interested
Right.
in joining and doing that.
And making the contract shorter. That way we have the ability to hire somebody if there is interest.
Well, this year's contract's gonna have to be the full season anyway, right? So I don't think we're
Mhm.
getting-
Right.
We're not gonna be able to.
No.
find
Yeah.
it. But I would like to see a certain set of rules or criteria, whatever you want to call it, job description. Grass is not supposed, it's gonna be this high and it's gonna be raked and not mowed out into the street or onto the sidewalk.
So they don't usually bag it, it's usually just cut
It's-
it and go.
Right, and
Yeah.
it's unacceptable, totally unacceptable.
I will say though, Andy's point about how often, like, I don't typically set foot in the cemetery the whole year. I don't know how often people
Lucky
go to
you.
the cemeteries. I mean, no one really wants to
Some
go to the
people-
cemeteries,
Right.
but I'm just wondering how often, what are they, is it once a week for every cemetery or every other week or?
Again, it totally depends on how quick it's growing.
Okay.
Right,
There's times where maybe it might be 2 weeks in between, even last year. I mean, if you get a lot of rain, I mean, you're not gonna be able to get equipment into some of these cemeteries.
Yeah.
I can only
Until it
imagine
dries out.
Carver's is the most wet,
It's not-
the
Especially at
wettest
the
of,
bottom.
I mean, it's so
It was-
much water runs down the hill.
It was really, the grass was really tall at one point last summer when I went down.
Yeah,
And everything else had been mowed. It just looked like it hadn't been mowed at all, but. you
maybe
know,
it was so wet, you'd sink down. into
Maybe.
the-
A rider would sink. It doesn't mean that
I don't
perhaps you
think a-
couldn't do it with weed whackers or push
Right.
mowers
Right,
necessarily,
a
but-
weed whacker, a rider wouldn't fit in that particular space.
Mhm.
I think it would have to be weed whack.
Speaking of time consuming.
Oh, sorry. All right. Are there any more questions on the cemetery?
weed whacking cemetery. No, not this.
I am gonna ask a question. Are there any more questions on the cemetery?
No, not for me.
So what's the conclusion?
The conclusion
is.
I
is,
believe we're gonna go forward with
We're gonna
Put it
appoint,
out to
we're
bid.
gonna do
Drawing
a
up a new-
committee.
No, we're gonna drop a new contract, correct with new terms, conditions, put it out to bid. I think that's the plan right now.
I don't,
And
middle of
revisit
March.
after the season.
if it were to say, if I could get it posted even by next week, you're still talking usually a minimum 2 week turnaround for those 2 to 4 weeks probably for the bids to come back. Just, I get the point is I don't know if you'll be able to know what that price is before you want to solidify the town warrant. So to Don's point, you kind of maybe got to figure out what, not tonight, but before the town warrant set, what that dollar amount you want to carry is, and it might be before you get a bid price.
That's fine, but we have a contract that's in place. Do we know that
Through
number right now?
June, yeah.
What's that? Do you know what that number is?
I said it's approximately, because it's split between this budget and the parks budget. I think it's about $700 a week. Right around $700 a week.
Yeah, I think it went, it went from.
I thought there was a
Yeah, it
total
should be in
dollar
there.
figure.
It
in the
is.
contract.
It is $700 a week.
Yeah.
I was 52.
Over 30.
36 more.
Thank you.
I know because I looked at the
So
check.
yeah, if we're starting at 36.4, it's gonna be well over 40, I would
That's
assume. Do we have to go up to 45?
But is this a 6-month job?
It's an annual contract. It's for the mowing season, and for us, like contract starts July 1st, goes to June 30th. So you're kind of, the way the contract falls, you end up ending it in the middle of the mowing season. So that was the consideration. Would we want to say, okay, do you want to consider a 6-month contract? That'll get us from July 1st, or even a 4-month contract, or July 1st to end of October. Right, and then you could, if you wanted to,
Advertise. the
advertise for a
position.
position, if you wanted to have a budget that would accommodate that. And you can make a decision that, hey, if we don't have anyone that's in the position, we can't do the job as of April 1st or March 1st. It doesn't look like we'll have anyone. You could re-advertise.
Yeah, that's.
And you could decide at
probably
that point whether it's for a split budget year or a part
Okay.
of the budget year.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's very,
So, but I agree, we're gonna have to come up with a figure, because we're probably not gonna have an answer before we have to finalize this, so.
Well, for Eric's questions, and I think when we talk about the public works budget in a week or two, there'll be a little bit more, about what additional work could be done. We can bring up a little bit more, circle back on that other half of, if you will, of a position.
And maybe
And what that,
you wouldn't have to bid out on some other projects. If another person exists on. the
Okay,
field,
right.
Away from mowing,
Just a
Maybe
heads up, I'm probably gonna have to leave this meeting in about 20 minutes if it's not over.
All right, how many more do we have on the budget?
Library,
Library and transfer station were the two I had for tonight.
Do we want to go to those two, or do we want to? Because we still have a little bit more in our regular meeting.
Right.
I think it's relatively quick on the regular meeting. We got through most of your reports,
I think transfer station is going to take a little while though, right? And library,
library shouldn't take long.
do we want to try to do library real quick? Is everybody have the stomach for that?
Is
Yeah,
Gabe
I
on?
think we should do library and get it done.
All right, let's do library and we'll call it good for the budget committee tonight.
those goals were ever updated. Some of those things are being done right now. So jumping to the summary page for that department. Again, an increase on the wage line, we're just reflecting the $2.50 increase that was approved. On the employee insurance, the two columns there, under my column, that represented 100%. The department column was the 85%, or what we currently cover.
And the retirement
The
change.
retirement change was what it looked like if you contributed up to 10%, if they matched the 5, or if you kept it at what it's at.
What's the service fee?
Service fee increases to account for hiring a company to come out and do a professional cleaning of the carpets every year. Okay, we've kind of been not necessarily on top of that.
I mean, this is
It's a pretty hefty
I was
increase
gonna say, this is a big increase.
Right,
all around.
we got, what, $2,000 in the retirement potentially as proposed, $2,400 to 44, another 11,000 on the wages, so you're up to $30,000 right there alone. So that, I mean, that account,
Do we need
the
to?
20,000 is really all born in the
No, I see that,
wage
but
and benefit.
books and periodicals,
That's
it
huge.
budget for 9,000 and we've only spent the last couple years only anywhere from $845 up to 2,100.
Mhm.
Do we really need to have that?
So some of that's artificially low only because of donations come in for, some people provide donations for book purchases.
Okay,
And so that comes in as an offsetting revenue for that particular line. I can try and find out what that amount is going back the last 2 years if you'd like.
Plus the friends.
The Friends cover a lot
They'll
for
pay
us. They
for
cover a lot of the,
anyways.
most of the programming fees.
Mhm.
If there are programming fees are not in our budget. The Friends pay for almost every programming fee. We provide the staff, of course, to be at it, but they pay for any costs associated with that. They pay for all the mailing costs associated with interlibrary loans. We don't see that expense. That can be substantial.
If I'm not wrong, I think they purchase books.
I think they've purchased books for like book clubs potentially, but generally, my understanding is that we've generally purchased like the monthly new book
Right.
releases and
the training dues and subs.
Mhm.
Like there.
Subscriptions.
Thank you.
Yep.
Again, actuals compared to budget, I mean, we're a few $100s versus a budget of 4,600.
Right. So that, broken down, there's 3,000 that was put in there a couple of years ago to support the staff of the library and then, seeking the MLIS program.
Has that
Education.
hasn't been done
It has not, but it had been in there, hearing the desire, and it's something that would benefit the library if that was something that they pursued and brought that experience back into the library and offered, enhanced programs or more knowledge that way. I mean, I saw that as an investment in the employee and again, bringing that experience back, just as if you were to go to a other training event or seek professional development otherwise. That's certainly an amount that I can double check with him to see if that's still a pursuit. He didn't remove it from. the
Because
budget
if
he
it's
prepared.
been there for a couple years and it's not, hasn't happened, like,
Mhm.
why keep it in there?
Right.
Sure.
Is there any record on how many people use the library? I seem to think this is a lot of money to spend on something that I don't see gets used nearly as much as what we're paying for. I don't know about everyone else, but I mean, maybe in the summertime, maybe in the summertime, have it staffed higher and maybe in the rest of the year, have it staffed lower and save some money on this. It just seems 100. Jesus, it's just hard to swallow for me.
So we do have the trustees get, and I provided it for as a handout, the last report. And so just looking at that from January, so they, the library does report out on items that were circulated. If there's programs during that period that is reported, it would include generally participation in those programs. But there were 736 items that were circulated for January and February, most of January and into early March. So that 2-month period, interlibrary loans, there were 25 items issued through the interlibrary loan for that 2-month period. That's the only stats that I have in front of me at the moment for this.
I'm looking for more like a head count that actually goes in there then. I mean, is this the same 30 people using it all the time, or is it 200 people? Is it, I mean, I know that they used to do some kid programming before COVID, but they didn't do much of anything the last couple of years, so it seems like I don't get it.
I think COVID put a damper on everything.
Right, but I
Even-
mean, just look at the budget, the actuals for 21, it's $80,000, and now we're up almost 130, like it's over 50% increase. I mean, I'm not against the library, but man,
That's a lot of
that's a
money.
big number. Eric,
And how much of the time is spent when the library's open and how much time is the stuff done behind the scenes when the library's not open for the employees?
Well, the librarian gets 40 hours.
Right, yeah, so there's, I think 32 hours a week that the library is open to the public. So that'll leave in 8 hours, split between 2 different days. You know, for the librarian to be able to do the administrative stuff if, without patrons in. The other position's a part-time position, I believe 28 hours a week, I think it is.
you're on the trustees,
I am no
correct?
longer.
You are no longer?
But I do agree, that is huge. Certainly in the winter, the 2 employees is,
But I know
More
most of
than
this
enough.
is, a lot of it's driven by the fact that we had to make some increases, benefits and pay. But it's.
Is there any way we can just cap this at 100,000 and tell them to make do? They can raise the money if they want to have more hours or do this or do that or charge. I mean, I just think this is, or cap it at last year's number. I mean, we can't go up to this number. It's crazy.
Yeah, this is a big
Well, at
one,
least they'll go to a 6.5% increase like we talked about.
right?
hmm. Yeah. It's like, holy sh- Hmm.
And it's not a lot of money for the position. It's just the increase that it's just had here.
Yeah, again, I think more information would help. I mean, it always does. So
The information being the use stats.
it would, yes, that would be helpful to see. All right. Summertime, we see an increase of,
It's very, very busy.
I'm sure it's busy and something, but like right now, I really doubt there's that much traffic. So do we even have it open for 40 hours, 32 hours a week? Like, there's got to be a way we can cut some of this cost here. So more information would help us make better decisions, obviously. So
Well, I guess the other thing you have to ask yourself, we cut the open hours. You've got a, I won't say a fixed cost, but you've certainly got an ongoing cost. It's not going to be reflective of the hours.
Right.
No matter what.
I
no
would,
matter
I would
what.
object
Right.
to cutting the hours. That to me wouldn't be.
that's not the way to do it.
No, I don't
Okay.
believe. I think to
Still
have,
paying
the-
your librarian.
I
while they're
think the
open.
librarian, the assistant librarian, while is very important during the busy months, but could maybe cut back hours in the winter months.
Is that going to really cut us back that much?
You're still gonna have to pay for insurance, so.
Right.
This is one of those areas where we might want to leave it a little bit till we get to the end, and then come back and say, okay, we need to make this many cuts. What are our priorities as a town?
Yeah.
Well,
Not,
the trustees have been really active lately, going through some strategic planning. What comes of that and the expectations for programs or library use and recommendations that way, I don't know yet, but where they have been so active, we can go back to them and to weigh in on what they would.
I would like a
Like to
report
see
from the
it.
trustees if they can provide it.
Well, Gabe was on the Zoom before we went into executive session. I was hoping that she was coming back because maybe she'd have a better idea, but she's not.
Well, we should hear from them
Yeah.
before this process is over, because I'd like to get some input from them.
Because
yeah.
it is an important function for the town.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we get rid of it, obviously not, but.
No, no, no,
th-
no,
This
no.
is, like I said, you go from 80,000 actuals,
Yeah.
and 2 years later, you're talking about a more than 50% increase, like that's just,
That's tough.
that's a lot.
It's too bad, because the library, nobody wants to be on the record of saying let's cut
Mm.
library funding.
No,
That's
exactly.
not a good, that's not.
That's, no.
I understand.
If anybody's gonna do it,
But
it'll be you.
no, it's not. I have a lot of happy childhood memories
Hours
in
that
that building, but
That it's open, right?
that,
you know, the
or
li-
the assistant librarian, you don't want
the
to.
larger
Right.
topic,
But
of course,
there
is what
does-
we're doing.
If it's not necessary, you're gonna have to do something. That is huge.
The larger topic is what we're working on right now, the strategic plan, is that the library is not used in the same way that it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Right.
You know, it's a different world.
All
right.
We need an assistant.
Eric, go ahead.
Going thing, 20 odd, oh, maybe 30 years now, when I was on it, when it went from, you know, a part-time librarian who was on social security, you know, we didn't have a full-time librarian until the late 80s.
Mhm.
And that's when the shift was.
Yeah. Wonderful librarians.
All right. Any other questions on library tonight? All right. This portion of the budget meeting is done. Those budget committee members are welcome to stay, but you can also leave if you choose.
I'm signing off.
Thank you very much.
Okay, see ya.
Thank you.
Have a good night. All right. Now, let's. Where did we leave off?
Committee reports,
8A committee appointments. Do we have any?
yes, I understand that we have someone who'd like to rejoin the library trustees.
Who is
And,
that?
Oh, I
Is it
know
you?
who it is.
Um,
No. No, I'm sorry.
Maggie Olson.
I move we appoint Maggie Olson to the library board of trustees.
Second.
All those in favor?
Trustees didn't want to recommend or take action to try and solicit new members at that point, because they thought she might come back, so she's
Since
happy
she
to be
does.
engaged again and involved in the process that they have going.
All right. We already did 8B,
Mhm.
8C librarians report.
Record here.
Yeah. I think we covered that pretty much already, didn't we?
For the budget portion, if you have think about report was presented, if there's additional things that you think would be helpful to have in the reports, I can relay that back.
I mean, I think it is important for us to get an idea of how many people are actually using the library services, I guess,
Off season or in general.
all season. I mean, it's clear that it goes up in the summertime, right?
It's
So
huge,
that's,
yeah.
that's when you're gonna need the most support.
And how, so I just want to make sure that we are able to capture that. You want to measure that.
That's what I'm trying to
In
think.
addition to the circulation numbers, so right, books checked out, so acknowledging that, some can be done via email and they can be available for pickup, but I mean, just how would you want to have staff try and measure library patron visits?
So
If they're
actual
only,
people going in.
right, so someone's gonna come in and
think
pick up a
so.
book, someone's gonna come in, maybe use a computer, someone's maybe
Right.
gonna come in and sit there for 8 hours a day because they're doing work from the library as they do in the summer.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that I can relate to the staff, how
Is-
we would want to measure, patron visits that.
Does that sound like the
Very.
best way, or, I mean,
It's gonna be hard because a lot of people sit outside for the Wi-Fi. I
okay,
mean, there's just tons of
That's in
people
the summer,
sitting
though.
in the summertime,
right?
Well,
but,
I mean, it's available year round, but
right, I'm just saying that, the librarians aren't gonna go outside and count the number of
Mhm.
people sitting.
No, I'm not expecting.
I don't think that's a huge circulation, 736 items in a
In 2 months.
2 months. That's not huge.
I know programming, when there is programming and people attend the programs, that would be a very easy thing to capture for a stat. Hey, we offered 3 programs this month and 100 people showed up for the 3 programs.
Well, I think that would be important too.
That's
If
much
you're
easier
offering
to-
more programs, that's how well they attended.
Right.
I mean, I guess counting how many people come through the doors, what does that really
Have a
give
little
you?
ticker on it when you
Right.
come through.
I don't know if that really does anything.
I mean, some come in just to use the bathroom, some come in
Right.
with the ACs on in the summer, they want to cool
Right.
off, but don't check a book out. So how do you,
Yeah.
measure the quality of, what is that sharing, what is that telling you? I mean, it tells you something, how often is the library used, but it's not telling you the quality or what they're doing while they're there, if you're just counting the number of times someone comes in, but we can certainly do that. And then maybe with the other information, it helps paint a bit more.
I mean, we should definitely know if they have programs or events or whatever, how well those are attended.
Well, I
That-
know
think
they
that's a good measure.
started story time again.
All right, yes, that's an event, a program,
That's every
whatever.
Wednesday.
So how well is that attended?
Um,
I'm not asking for the answer.
right,
That's
I,
something they
no,
need to
no, I
track.
don't think it is right now that well attended. I mean, I don't know how that's gonna be helpful. I mean, it will,
But that's what they're spending a lot of their time on, right? Is setting up these programs, providing the service, and then, so if they're not well attended,
I think it's important to come back to like, what do we, the library is there for a purpose, right? And it's not necessarily to just store books. So I think it's important for between the trustees and the board to understand how the community want to use the
Mhm.
library and find out, then we can know how to measure it. I mean, if it's
All right.
about, people want to come to programs, and we can measure it and how many programs are offered, how many people show up to programs.
Which I think
It's
the
about
strategic
circulation.
planning is covering all of that.
Mhm.
It's covering a lot of,
all right, so until we speak to the trustees, how about we hold off on requiring additional reporting, but
There are also annual reports that go to the state.
Yep.
That have to be filed, and so some of that, I can maybe pull out some of that for you at a future meeting and share what at least goes in those reports.
Yep.
Knowing we're open 12 months a year, and you can figure out how many hours we're open in a year, you can kind of run numbers in different ways if you want to look at that.
I think COVID has put such a different face on everything. It's hard to determine.
I
well,
agree.
it's over
You
now,
know?
so we're going back to normal. so-
Well, I know, but it's gonna
Just
take a
kidding, I'm
minute.
kidding.
It's over for me.
Well, there are ways in which people have used libraries perhaps differently. Some have shut down even more to the degree we did. Some may have really not changed a whole lot in certain towns. So it is kind of, but we can look at the data presented from libraries, and the state does have a decent portal to go in and look. Some of them you can download the Excel spreadsheet, and so you can kind of look at the library, and I can maybe send you the links if you want to look at some of that on your own too. And look in the kind of group library use based on size. So you can look at, how do we compare to other libraries, serving population services our size. You can look at the financial part of it. How well funded are they? How are they funded? Whether they're public libraries or standalone libraries. Some towns just give an amount to a public library, but it's run by its own board. So they offer a lot of data that gets reported out annually, and librarians are really good about reporting data.
Yes.
So there's a lot there to look at. So that's something you can dive into if you want to look at, and maybe from that we can say, oh, let's emphasize and track this one a little bit more. Let's understand this a little bit more.
All right,
Where did you say that information was, and
I can send you the link, but it's something you can find through the main library network or state of Maine library. I'll send it. I know where to find it. I can send it out though in a link if you want to look through that. There's like an association, and there's like the main library,
Yeah.
main.gov source. So I can't remember which one it's under, but I can find it again.
all right, 8D engineer report. The big thing is, oh no, that's an old business.
So yeah, we're still waiting on the SHIP grant. That's one of our big grants that we still want to go after to try and get matching funds for the NBRC $1 million grant we were awarded. We need to match the $1 million still. We're a good chunk of the way there. But that 250,000 that we could get from the SHIP grant would put us in a really good position to help rebuild those wharfs, those boat launches. So we're waiting on them to submit that letter of intent for us, and then they'll help put together the documents needed to move forward with that. They did have some staff out looking at the Main Street project, verifying some of the design work they had going, verifying on the ground, where things are. Transfer station, still waiting for kind of those final documents from them. We can talk briefly about where things stood based on our last conversation. Still have the older plans. We can pull those out to show you what those look like. Yeah, all efforts kind of focused on the downtown project primarily, but I'm trying to push for those transfer station plans. My concern is that
Right, we
At
need to
this
get that
point,
out
I
to
don't think
bid.
that's gonna happen before summer at this point.
Right,
If we don't have bid documents drafted, maybe they're drafted, but if they're not drafted yet, you still haven't approved the final design. We're in the middle of March. If you've got a project out to bid for 3 to 4 weeks,
Right.
I mean, you're talking 1st of May by the time you sign a contract with someone.
Can
There's
we
no
make
way it's gonna be able to be turned around.
I can make very clear with Brent that we expect to see those plans tonight. I thought we'd have some. And he
So
did
we
too.
don't-
He did too.
we don't have in 9A, we don't have,
I mean, I can show you what they were in January. Not much has changed, but I mean, I don't have final, I don't have any indication that we're ready to have bid documents, ready, the final drafted plan, so.
Don't bother until this year.
Yeah.
all right,
With the same plans now.
Since January, there hasn't been, the design hasn't had a substantial change. We've elongated a few sections here and modified.
well, I
what
know
something
the,
looked like.
I know the downtown project is moving forward and it's important, but we need those finalized plans so we can get this out to bid. I, I agree that it's looking hard for us to have that done before the summer now, so.
I don't want to do it in July. August.
I don't either. No one does. You want to?
Yeah.
Well,
Why
enough.
shouldn't everybody enjoy the inconvenience?
we don't
True.
work there, so we
It's
don't
true.
care, right? No, that's not true. That's a
Otherwise
joke,
we get
but,
chicken fillet country.
certainly needs to get, yeah, rattle cages, I guess.
All right. AE downtown project update. Is that the report from Gabe, correct? Okay.
And that's finally some good news.
Yeah.
Some excellent news.
I
Was
shared
that more than originally? I thought it was 1.29 before.
So we had submitted one to Representative Pingree's office and one to Senator King's office.
Yep.
And we had, both of them were initially for 1.4, and then something was modified with Pingree's at one point, and went down to 1.2 something. And
Yeah.
then they came back to us a couple weeks ago and said, obviously a difference in project costs here that you submitted between the two offices. So, what do you want the number to be? And so we did modify it to be 1.4. And Representative Pingree took that to the Appropriations Committee, and that was approved, and then the Senate approved, and now the president signed. So we haven't had any other follow-up since then. So I mean, I assume things will come, but that's huge and great news. And a lot of that will support drainage, additional drainage work that runs adjacent to the EDA project. And so we do have the engineers kind of working on, because now we have 3 major funders and kind of like 3 different projects happening. And so we're going to have a nice color coded map to show which funded projects from which funders are covering certain things. So largely drainage, to carry the water that'll be collected on Main Street as part of the EDA project to wherever it needs to go. And then a fair amount of money to support sewer improvements, sewer system improvements. So some of that might be able to help cover some of the big $1 million worth of capital needs that plan identified a few years ago. That'll be a huge help for the sewer district to be able to have money to invest there. Will kept coming up with long lists of things
Yeah.
to work on in addition to the engineer's plans or study there.
Lots of
So
stuff.
great news, and we at our last meeting, we met last Tuesday, there was a public meeting happening for the downtown project as an update to the community. The next morning, there was the stakeholder meeting, which we try to have those monthly or close to monthly. The general community updates, we are looking to do those a little more spaced out. But
Plus, what did Brent say that you should apply for the grant for sewer that we talked about? Remember, Eric?
Sorry, I gotta take off. I gotta go eat supper.
Oh.
All right, Jake. Thanks for
Hey,
calling.
I've been sitting in here for 2.5 hours and it's 80 degrees out, so that's pretty good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
See ya.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks for the update.
Hey, felt like 80 degrees today, right?
It did for a minute.
38 degrees there.
So
They
anyway,
got
I
up to
was
50,
just
didn't it?
trying to recall what
I think
he
my cousin
said, that
41.
yes, you should apply for those, but you'd have to ask him, because I
was it for
didn't,
sewer or for water?
it's for sewer.
Okay.
I do not remember what he said.
I'll double check.
It was nothing that I'm familiar with. The only thing I've ever heard is there's no money available for sewer. That's all, that's what we've been told.
Yep, another thing COVID changed.
And so, yeah, so maybe you'll have to ask him what they were, but,
Sure.
um,
All right, any other questions on downtown project update? All right, 8F road commissioners report. Let's
To
move through
hand
these
out,
quickly.
I can tell you.
yeah, you can read the details in there. Lily had given a update from last week and what was done in a preview of what was hoping to be done this week. I think she feels really good about the progress she's been able to make in the last couple of weeks with the crew. Emphasizing a lot on, just observing, practices and how we're doing things. Some of the time spent today was redoing a project we did last week that didn't meet, what she expected it to be. So I think that's good to kind of have a standard for our own work.
Is that number one?
Yes, one of them.
Yep.
The Poor Farm Road is what it was. That was something that her and I were just out on a drive looking at infrastructure needs, and she says, "Oh, well, there's a hole in the road." So we got out and had a rock bar, and we managed to pull up most of that road next to that culvert. It was bottom of it was completely washed out. There was a complete cavity running parallel to that, and just pure luck that we saw it on that day, on that Thursday. Otherwise, it probably would have opened up on a Saturday or Sunday.
Oh,
How much precedent is there to widen somebody's driveway on a town's dime?
So it's not a widening of their driveway. If you think of we gotta put a culvert under a driveway and it runs through our ditch line. And so when she says widen the driveway, it's probably that
Yeah,
an
it's- she
apron
said
where the
the
culvert
apron.
needs to be. So it's not like you're widening out and paving the driveway.
I know, but still.
It's our ditch line that we have to maintain, and we want to make sure that their driveway on our approach for the drainage isn't gonna be one that they run over the culvert. So I hear what you're saying, but it's not.
last name, right? So be quiet.
I want the clerk to catch that.
I mean, the material, if it helps, the material's in the ditch line, right?
Yeah.
It just widens out where how the culvert's covered. Once you get beyond that culvert, it's still a same width driveway.
so there were 6 benches down there altogether?
I don't.
So 3 were brought to the garage.
And they did drain the ball ground,
I know.
start draining the ball ground.
Those poor ducks.
I know, they're stuck in the mud.
Big ocean out there.
With geese are going, what the
There's some-
Why
heck?
can't the
know,
geese
but they were
stay
so-
away from the school? Like,
Oh, I
sorry, getting off
know.
topic.
I
Anyway,
know, just a little bit, I agree.
I didn't actually see it, but last weekend, at the end of last week, someone told me the chains are still on the trucks. I don't want to try to
They were last
micromanage.
week, yeah.
Okay, they're off now.
I assume so. We talked about taking them off. but-
Okay. because-
So they took the plows off, so I assume that.
she's just checking.
I mean, one of, neither of the ones that we still have running, the big ones have 4-wheel drive. And so if they get any sort of ice out there, I mean, they gotta do what they gotta do it's not ideal that she doesn't want them on there with the roads being as soft as they are, but they gotta do what they gotta do to make sure the trucks get around. So the goal was to take them off. The goal was not to use plows or sanders anymore this time of year, but depending on what happens tonight, there might need to be need in the morning if it's
All
icy.
rain.
It's
If it's icy, and not saying we're going to do it, just if the conditions require it, then that's something that we have to do.
Okay, that's enough talk about chains there.
9A, transportation improvements, review proposed improvements, but we don't have them, correct?
Yeah.
All right, so we will move on to 10, new business. We
Donna's
already did
trying to
that.
move along here.
Mm.
10B, ambulance fee schedule, proposed rate change.
Not proposing I'm gonna put on there, I want to talk to Pat about this and make sure there aren't other increased costs that I didn't know about. And this primarily is because Penobscot Island Air raised their fees effective last week.
Yes,
You
It's a good thing I never fly them.
I know, you can't. you wouldn't do
fly
that
to and from New
for
York, but cheaper than to and from
I
Rockland.
was- If you want to go to Portland,
So our current rate for, having to fly a patient off is $975. So that at least, if we don't take action today, that at least covers the bill we get from PIA. It might not cover entirely the crew time and the other fees associated with having to fly, but at the very least, we're able to bill that and cover the cost as long as an insurance company is willing to pay that cost. So I do want to go back through with Pat and look at and make sure that there aren't, we did increase wages a little bit. So I was going back through and, making sure, I just want to make sure with her that there aren't other things I'm missing. I didn't have a chance to do that since Friday.
okay, that's fine.
But just if there's questions you have on this now, at least I can go and meet with her about those and make sure that, you know, we're where we need to be. Give anything on any of those.
My best advice to everyone is to never get sick, because if you get sick, you have a good chance of going bankrupt. So
Yeah, life like woke me up last night at midnight. Must have woken you up too.
No,
I did
I
hear,
had no
I heard
idea.
it.
11:50.
Yeah.
Last night?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then it took off at 12:13.
Imagine the crew and volunteers that had to get up to go
Yeah.
help
so
the
we
person
thought
in
of
need
it.
and the person that needed the help.
And
I
you know
know,
what's
I
funny is I
everybody
was up
last
at like
night.
midnight with the dog and I never,
All right. So we will expect an updated fee schedule.
Yeah, it may
Next
not be
meeting.
different, but yeah, I'll have Pat's input for the next meeting and something that you can consider.
All right. Number 11, report of town manager.
It is there for review. We did start this week our audit. We had a meeting today with the auditors, a few more things we need to send in, but I feel like we're in a good position. And we're moving forward with that.
They are just doing the town audit. They're not doing the school.
Town and sewer, they did the school audit already.
Okay, so we did get them to
Same
agree to do
thing.
everything.
Yeah.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, the school contracted them for theirs and a little bit of cost savings
Yes.
to coordinate that is helpful. So they did theirs, I believe, last week. Because the only thing I'll note, we had a notice for the ferry service that there's a change
Tomorrow,
Just
right?
continuing our run.
Yep.
Final route has been discontinued.
That is something I guess I'll touch on quick in my update, add a little bit underneath the ferry service there. I had followed up this particular notice with a question, will there be a replacement boat while that one's offline? And didn't say there would be, and I assume there might not be, but I wanted clarification, and it was definitely a no. You know, but it sparked other points to be raised about crew availability and how short-staffed they are, and that, you know, if any one boat has even potentially one person that doesn't show up, I mean, there's a chance that runs could be canceled. And for us, we have 2 boats, but for the other islands, there's only 1 boat serving them. So, you know, it was also mentioned that even if the Spear was available to run, there isn't a crew big, and you know, they don't have enough staff to be able to run it right now. So this is you know, kind of raising the red flag on that from the department. They're doing what they can to try and get the administration and the DOT and those above them that have controlled you know, we're in the same situation a few weeks ago, and why we considered raising rates. You know, they are not able to they are not able to attract people to try and fill those positions posted at $13, $14, $15 an hour. You're just not getting it. And so their process is a little different than ours. It involves admin, legislature, and you know, their hands are a little more tied, but it's something that, you know, they've mentioned. It was generally in the light of COVID, but this is a little bit different. You know, if there's any sickness, regardless of COVID or anything, if anyone else says they want to retire or leave, I mean, it doesn't sound great.
No, they don't pay much at all.
That's the OS and
It's
AB.
not.
AB rates are both under $20 an hour.
You get good benefits, but
The pay is not.
yeah, you can't eat.
You
eat
can't
your
pay
benefits.
your mortgage or anything else with your
Yeah.
benefits.
You know, and they're competing with the merchant marine industry that people can go out and
Yeah.
make
Right.
more money in one day than most of them, even the captain's making in a week probably.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to compete. You know, we deal with it on our side and other types of jobs that we try and get filled, and you don't compete with private sector wages. And so I don't know what'll come of that. There was a meeting yesterday that, you know, the management had with admin, and I haven't had a chance to follow up to see how that went. I did say, you know, this is maybe one of those opportunities we can actually work together on advocating for certain things. And just let us know how we can be helpful as a community to talk to who we have to talk to. If we don't want to see what it looks like, if they don't have to.
This is a while ago. Phil asked to be on
Yep,
the
I didn't-
advisory board, right?
he's on the
Or not,
advisory
he
board.
Asked to be on the,
In the packet of that last page of my report there, I didn't see where it required. He mentioned that they would like that there be an acknowledgement from the select boards to appoint representatives to this study that's happening. I don't see an issue with it if that's what they're asking for. I just didn't see it in that email that they were looking for that. But if you want to acknowledge Phil to kind of serve as a representative
yes.
on this
That was good.
this study.
Oh, it was different.
So the Island Institute's commissioned a study. It does have the Maine DOT and ferry service kind of blessing, and they'll be involved in this study, but they're looking at needs assessment and strategy for the future of the island transportation to the 6 islands served by the Maine State Ferry Service. So being paid for, I think, all through Island Institute, however they covered that. They want representatives from each of the islands served by the ferry service to be part of it. The commissioner and the main ferry service manager are part of this process.
Do we have to make a formal motion or is it just?
Phil suggested that's what the group was wanting.
I move Bill Crossman is the town of Vinalhaven's representative to the Island Institute. So they,
Second.
All those in favor?
Great.
Thank you, Phil. Anything else we need?
If there's questions or anything else on that.
Board of members,
I just would like to remind Andy, can you check to see if those are trash things down there? And if so, if they're worth setting out? And,
Do you have a particular place you were hoping to see those ones?
well, just, are they to be used like, what, downtown or?
The ones at downtown have a lid on them that we can
Right.
lock so that people aren't throwing their household trash there.
Right.
hopefully.
Or should they be put at the quarries? I don't know, just if they're usable
Sure.
at the parks,
Mhm.
for example, I would suggest.
Sure. Yeah, I'm wondering if those ones don't have, maybe we can get a different lid for them. I'm wondering if, the one that you showed me earlier had
Yeah.
didn't have a top on it, so.
Right,
We end up emptying bags full of rainwater when it's
Right.
raining. So maybe it's something we can just get a different type of top for and. but
maybe
I'll-
that's why they're down there, maybe they aren't, maybe they don't work
Yeah.
right or
No.
something, I don't know,
I'll
I have no idea.
I'll follow up on that.
It just seemed like they were just kind of tossed there, and if they're no good, then they should be disposed of, and
Right.
if they're usable, then we should. And also, could you remind her that there are the 2 benches at the top of the
Mm.
sledding hill? I mentioned it when she called me the other day, that that'd be nice if they would take them up to the garage also. Thank you.
might still look at.
Hmm?
They might be studying. yeah, they don't know.
Oh, geez, maybe tomorrow.
no.
Just never know. All right, please.
Anyone else?
I move to adjourn.
Second, all those in favor?
Yes.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Excellent.